See, this is about allegiance to principle. Either you believe that, and we give lip service to it, don't we? We all say, swear an oath of allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, and then we let the Congress take federal action that has no constitutional authority whatsoever. And I had a reporter here in Dallas today tell me, don't you know about the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution? I said, don't you know about Article 1, Section 8? That's the only thing they are supreme. Everywhere else belongs to the state of Texas. These are issues of principle. It's not to say we're advocating anarchy. It's to say that Texas agriculture might not look like Oklahoma agriculture. Texas is going to take care of her farming and ranching. If we need to regulate farming and ranching in Texas, Washington, D.C. doesn't need a finger in that. We'll do that right here in Texas. So this campaign started with just one of us, somebody of no notoriety. I think the radio interview this morning, I was asked what salacious thing is going to come out, and I said, somebody's going to have to make something up, because I just haven't been that exciting in my life. I've had to work too hard to provide for 2 kids and to be, I traveled a lot. Before I started Prudentia, I was the Vice President of Business Development for a company that did work with law firms all over the United States, and I traveled a lot. Boy, I couldn't wait to get home, and I would frequently say I have a husband and 2 kids, an intact marriage and family, and I want to keep it that way. You know, I worked hard. You don't build a family today without working hard. And so I told the campaign team when we got started, I said, as far as I know, there's no skeletons that are going to embarrass you, and I'm going to tell you that. There's no skeletons in my closet that are going to embarrass you, so you think twice the next time you hear some salacious piece of information about who Debra Medina is, because I've stood here and looked you in the eye and told you I'm just about as boring as they come. I'm a law-abiding, hard-working, honest Texas girl. And so I got into this race, and some years ago had recognized that I didn't think we were asking candidates for office the right question. I thought we were letting them give lip service to the issues that were important in today's race. Y'all are all concerned, we're all concerned about the federalization of health care, we're all concerned about cap and trade, and candidates will get up here and tell you they're against cap and trade and they're against the federalization of health care, and that's well and good in February of 2010, but what's the crisis going to be in January of 2011 when they take office? And are they going to know where to stand on that issue? And I've been saying for some years we ought to be asking these candidates, why don't you tell us what you think keeps us free? Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think about the proper role of government? Do you understand that this free society rested once on 3 pillars? Families and individuals used to have some responsibility. Remember when? Communities and churches used to play a role in this society. Remember when? And the government's job was to have a fair and just set of laws that applied equally to everybody. Their job wasn't to deliver health care. It wasn't to make sure the kids were educated. It wasn't to provide this service and that service and every service under the sun. It wasn't to regulate business. Can't even make a decision in your business anymore for filling out the government forms and regulations. See, we had 3 pillars once. We've got to start getting back to that. And so I've made the cornerstone of this campaign that issue of freedom. And many of you have nodded your head and said, that's right, private property ownership is the cornerstone of freedom. As critical to freedom as air and water is to life. We're either going to be free, we're going to fight that battle, we're going to fight it at the ballot box, we're going to fight it on the soapbox, or one day somebody's going to have to open up the ammo box to get back what we've lost. We don't own our property. We've we rented. And everything about government ought to be telling us, should have been telling us for 30 years, we're tenants. We're tenants. You want to put a little utility shed in the back of your house, you got to get permission from the landlord because it ain't your land. You want to add a carport beside your home, you got to have permission because it ain't. Isn't that just how a landlord treats a tenant? You want to drill a water well, you want to pump water out of that water well, do you? You're going to have my permission because you can only have so many gallons a day. Whose land is it anyway? When the government owns the means of production, you don't have a free society. As a teenager, I thought that the United States of America competed in every way with Russia. It seemed to me we were racing to the moon and we were racing in the Olympics, and Russia competed. That nation that was replete in natural resources had a government that took and took and took from the people, and the people quit working. This isn't about whether or not we have natural resources. It's about whether or not people will produce. And when the government takes from you, and when you have to live like a tenant, as a sharecropper, you know, as an indentured servant, you don't have much incentive to work. I met a man early in this campaign. Y'all are beautiful people. But this crowd doesn't represent Texas. Have you noticed? We're free and prosperous because the wealth of a nation is our people, and we better start communicating with all of Texas. And I started early in this campaign reaching out to those media sources that communicated with all different areas of Texas. Not just the Hispanic population, but I think next week I'm going to talk to a large group of Vietnamese business people. You know, this is a diverse population in Texas. And I went in Austin to visit with the editor of a newspaper, El Mundo newspaper. Some of you may have heard me tell this story. I was to meet with a man named Gabriel Bruzon. Medina is a Hispanic last name. No, he's about as Tex-Mex Mexican as you can get. And we had both grown up in South Texas. There were Garcias and Gonzaleses and Pettises and a few Medinas, but I had never met anybody whose last name was Bruzon, and I was pretty curious about that. And I asked him about the origin of his name. He told me he was Cuban. And then I got real curious. I wondered how he had got out of Cuba. I didn't think anybody got to leave there. And I had often thought that we as Americans believe that when the isms come to our country, socialism, communism, Marxism, fascism, we think it's going to come with purple spots, or they're going to look like lepers walking in to stand up in front of you, and you're going to pick out the fascist in the row of candidates, you know, because they're going to look different. And here sits this guy who had grown up in communist dictatorship Cuba. His family had been there, he said, for 4 generations. And I said, tell me, Gabriel, if I had taken a picture of you standing on the street in communist dictatorship Cuba, and I took a picture of you today, 3 years later, standing on the street in Constitutional Republic, Austin, Texas, what would be the difference between that man in Cuba and the one in Austin? And he said the man in Cuba had no dreams. Everything was free. Healthcare was free. Education was free. But we had no dreams. I couldn't plan where I would work, where I would go, what I would do. We had no dreams. I'm going to tell you, the dreams that my children have are a lot less vivid than the dreams I used to have. They see the tyranny and oppression coming to America. They see that they're living as tenants on the land. They see that they're indentured servants to their government. It's not a pretty picture to see your kids graduating from college with lights in their eyes, and then they get that first income tax return and they are just devastated to see what the government is taking. We'll either recognize that private property ownership and gun ownership are essential elements of freedom, and we'll get them back,